Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for standing by, and welcome to the Beat the Windows XP Deadline and Wow Your Business Users webcast, presented by PC Helps and Microsoft. During the presentation, all participants will be in a listen-only mode. You may, however, submit questions to the speaker through the chat feature located to the left of your screen. We will also conduct a live question and answer session at the end of the conference, should you want to ask your question directly to the speakers. As a reminder, today's call is being recorded June 20th, 2013. Our hosts today are Brett Orand, Client Technical Specialist for Microsoft, and Joe Puckett, Director of Training for PC Helps. Brett and Joe will offer some tips and advice to assist you and your organization put the right game in place to successfully transition from Windows XP in time, as well as impress your business users in the process. With that, Joe, I'll hand it over to you.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Surveys have made it pretty clear that significant numbers of organizations are still on Windows XP or are currently in the process of migrating. In the course of talking to them, we found typically three reasons for that to be the most common. One is budgetary issues, because very often operating system migrations are tied to hardware upgrades, and budgets have not included hardware upgrades, and so we're still on XP. The other is the compatibility issues. Anytime you move from operating systems, there are proprietary systems, turnkey systems that may need some tweaking and to make sure that they're actually going to work. And you can, of course, can't migrate unless the business critical systems are going to go there. And another thing that we realize is this is not the only thing you have to do. And you really do have a lot of other things going on, and that has often, in many cases, not left time to actually take a look at this. But we are coming up on the end of life for XP, and so now it now becomes necessary to make that move. And what we'd like to do today is to help identify ways to make that go more smoothly. Now, I'm going to assume that you're all familiar with Microsoft, but some of you may not be as familiar with PC Help, so I wanted to share a little bit about us to help set context, give some perspective on what we do and our areas of expertise. Our focus is on end-user productivity with off-the-shelf software and mobile devices. In particular, we work as a specialized supplement to existing support and training operations, and we do that by providing flexible solutions which work really well with the compressed time frame and chaotic conditions typical of migrations. So the things we're going to look at today are what exactly are the deadline for XP and also Office 2003, the implications that has for your business, some of the licensing options and system compatibility considerations, making a decision between Windows 7, Windows 8, which is best if you want to go all to one, or should you really go to a mixed environment, and also some project planning elements, what to expect before, during, and after migration, some of the tools that will make that planning and execution more easily. Now, all those are things that Brett will be addressing. I will mainly be talking about maximizing business user adoption and grabbing some of that organizational return on investment that's available. So again, we do thank you for joining us today, and we will be going to a polling question so we can begin to understand where you as a group are. So if you'd be so kind as to submit your answers to this question, we will then move on into the actual content. Okay, looks like for the most part we have people have responded, and you can see there that it looks like we're primarily planning to go to Windows 7, with not so many planning to go fully to Windows 8, and also we expect some mixed environments. That will be very helpful information to allow Brett Orand, who is joining us today from Microsoft, and will help present materials to help you make that transition. With that, please, Brett, begin sharing if you could, please.
Sure, Joe, I'm just going to make sure you can hear me. If you can confirm that for me quick.
You sound good.
Good. Good afternoon, evening, or morning, depending on where you're tuning in from. My name is Brett Arnn. I'm a Microsoft Client Technical Specialist for the Mid-Atlantic District, and I work with some of our largest customers in that district, in that geography. As of today, we have about 292 days left on the support cycle for Windows XP and Office 2003. That's actually about 2 years beyond our traditional support life cycle, which is closer to a standard 10 years on operating systems. So the date that's coming is April 8, 2014. So what does that really mean in terms of end of support? On that date, you will no longer receive security patches, hot fixes, change requests, or incident support. Running an older OS platform is, on a technical level, less secure, a little bit more difficult to manage and expensive to maintain. We'll get into some of that a little bit later. Running on an older operating system also exposes you to business and regulatory risks that you need to manage. You may incur costs as well as the technical issues relating to custom support. So as far as an action here, first, thank you for being a Windows XP customer. But as far as going forward, you want to consider migrating to Windows 7 and 8 to take advantage of the new features and the latest versions of Windows to improve security and user productivity, supportability, and we'll extend that support will be extended out through the year 2020. So let's talk about some of the benefits of retiring Windows XP and Office 2003 today. Start jumping these one at a time. There's 3 key reasons to retire these products. First is that you want to get value of what we consider a modern desktop today. That would be Windows 7 and or Windows 8. And stop for a minute and think of the value you get from other technologies. Today, no one carries around a 12-year-old smartphone, mainly because the technology has made great advances. Windows XP and Office 2003 are about 12 years old. Windows 7 offers customers a number of proven benefits, high performance and responsiveness, modern UI to help user productivity. Windows 7 Enterprise, a specific SKU, offers great advancements to IT organizations. For example, it provides a more protected and secure environment than Windows XP with technologies like BitLocker drive encryption, BitLocker to go. That helps to ensure sensitive data is protected in your organization right out of the box. Windows 8 delivers experiences and new devices that users want while providing companies with enterprise-grade solutions. And there are specific investments we're making with Windows 8 for the enterprise. We hear from business users today that they have to choose between convenience and productivity. With Windows 8 tablet, users can have somewhat of a no-compromise experience. Let's get into that. Oh, sorry. Windows 8 delivers a touch-first experience with the full support of the mouse and keyboard and pen if you'd like. A no-compromise experience. Your users can have the convenience of that tablet and yet have the power of like an Ultrabook as well. So they can move quickly between work and personal activities on one device. That's what we bring to the table. Also with Windows 8 tablet, users can have a connected experience with apps from the Windows Store, as well as using their traditional Windows 7 apps and line of business apps to make sure they get the productivity that they're used to. Windows XP support, like I said earlier, is less than a year away, and I think Gartner has said that it takes most companies 18 to 24 months, so it doesn't leave folks with a lot of time to get moving to the new operating system. Customers need to migrate their PCs prior to that date to avoid sort of that significant risk of unsupported software. As I said, there'll be no security updates to it. Now, custom support agreements are possible with Microsoft. I'll talk about them a little bit later. They allow you to get critical security fixes, paid incident support, but they can be upwards of, actually they start out at around $200,000 a year for software assurance customers and up to $500,000 for that first year for non-software assurance customers. The other thing that's going on is Gartner and folks like IDC, you see there, are telling us that many independent software vendors are going to be unlikely to support new versions of applications on Windows XP. Let me give you an example. Office 2013, which is our most recent build, is not supported on Windows XP currently. And Gartner further adds that the original equipment manufacturers like Dell and HP, etc., are likely going to reduce the number of PC models that are out there and supported with XP drivers and functionality, guidance, etc. Finally, deployment is something that's advanced a bit since the XP days and has been in place from Microsoft for years. I know in the past folks use a lot of third-party tools for that. All that is now standardized. We offer a variety of tools, guidance, best practice, and sort of other resources to help with that deployment project. I'll show you some of those tools later on and where you can find them, what they're called, but most of them are accessible on TechNet. We also offer evaluation versions of operating systems. So today you can download Windows 8 Enterprise on a trial basis, and I believe it's available for either 90 or 120 days. So you can just sort of check out the feature set that's there if you want to do that. And corporations are also sometimes offered programs. You see the Accelerate program there. That's a series of proof of concepts and pilots where you can start to get integrated into not only the technology but how you deploy it and how you roll it out. And finally, there's a high-level compatibility between Windows 7 and Windows 8. Most all Windows 7 apps out of the box work on Windows 8. The hardware is supported, and in fact, the operating system Windows 8 uses less processes and requires less of a hardware footprint to work than even Windows 7 did. So most corporations that have a machine that's spec'd in the last 6 years would be capable of running Windows 8 today. A few years ago, just sort of getting into the cost studies, when Windows 7 came out in 2009, we did some cost-saving studies with some of the customers you see in the box in the lower right-hand corner with using Windows 7 Enterprise and our MDOP technologies to sort of get some of the financial impact of what these newer modern operating systems bring. For example, at Getronics, the service desk staff spend 17% less time resolving issues, and so PC migration their migration times drop 30 minutes per machine. The city of Miami actually estimated that their power savings of using Windows 7 over XP resulted in an annual savings around $38 a PC, and that actually helped them to almost completely cover their cost of acquiring the software. So that level of granularity was not available in Windows XP, and the desktop management savings listed there as well have also been realized by a number of customers in that study. That's all available online. If you go and search on Microsoft case studies, you can look for all those studies and get quotes and impact from the actual customer. When we look specifically at Windows 8, we see some of the business benefits listed in the 4 key areas above. These can be referenced from the Microsoft website, or I would encourage you, if you're an enterprise customer, to reach out to your local Microsoft account team and try and get a full briefing on Windows 8 in the enterprise, which I know when I do it is upwards of an hour to an hour and a half conversation. So time really doesn't allow us to go into it now, but it's definitely something I'm sure your account team would love to touch base if you want. Let me just speak briefly about one of these the benefit pillars from the previous slide. With Windows 8, and I already spoke of this, no compromise business tablet. We are best first with a touch experience. There's a multitude of hardware options and form factors depending on your business use case out there. You see, the small tablets to the hybrids, the convertibles to the desktop units. And clearly you've seen Microsoft enter the hardware business as well with our Surface RT and Surface Pro devices. They are resonating very well with my enterprise customers. but again, there are other OEM vendors that help us sort of cover off on all those potential case users. My personal device that Microsoft provides for me that I'm presenting on today is a Asus UX31A touch laptop with a brushed aluminum finish. It's a really nice device to work on, very light, thin, quiet, and my companion device is actually a Surface RT device. So what's nice also about this no compromise approach is the Microsoft Office suite will always be best and first on Windows devices versus all other devices. We support an extremely high percentage of Windows 7 apps as well as your line of business apps on Windows 8. And the increase in security on these devices with encryption and the enablement of UEFI and anti-malware, etc., all ensure and help that you have a safe computing environment. The last piece that I enjoy on Windows 8 is the cloud-connected aspects. I've become device agnostic in terms of where my data is. It is my business data follows me in the cloud in a product called SkyDrive Pro, and my personal data also follows me, is automatically synced in a product that you can all download in called SkyDrive. So I'm not going to read these verbatim, but some of these are some quotes from Gartner to read through. This one speaks to exposing security vulnerabilities to hackers, so I'll pause just a little bit here and take a breath and let you look through that one. And this slide speaks to the money and where you can best spend it. Are you going to spend your money on sort of a custom support agreement, or are you going to look at investing in migrating, not just this operating system, but future ones as well? And I think this is my last quote that I have here. This one speaks to support. I was actually looking today for another assignment. I was looking at the Lenovo page, and looking at the Lenovo Helix model, which a lot of folks like, and looking at the available driver sets on it. It has available drivers for Windows 7 and Windows 8, but as expected, there's nothing there for Windows XP. So companies are not, providing the support for XP on their latest hardware as well. When you look at some of the, sorry, let me advance the slide. When you look at some of the changes and the threats that have evolved over time, you can see that only the modern OSs are fully equipped to secure the end user from some of the external attacks. I think the key takeaway here is that the security threats we had in the past, say in the past decade, have vastly changed since where we're at today. We just had an internal briefing on this yesterday, and one of the key things that were pointed out was in the past where you might have one or two hackers, you're now seeing organized approaches to hacking and security. If you followed the news in the past week on Microsoft, there was a story regarding how we helped expose an organized botnet ring that affected about 2 million PCs globally. That wouldn't have been in existence a number of years ago. So the landscape has changed, and we have to change the operating system with it. I also want to point out that in a recent briefing on the Security Intelligence Report that we published, we compare the infection rate to Windows operating system. And the fact is right now you're about 21 times more likely to be hit by a malware instance on Windows XP than you would on a modern operating system. I just want to talk earlier, and I already spoke to this, but I don't want to belabor the point, but when you're looking for a custom support agreement, if you want to extend your Windows XP, first of all, you need to be a current Premier support customer and to be eligible for that. It is designed for customers who need additional time to complete migration, so I think as part of it, they have a, you have to come up with a migration plan ahead of time before you enroll. And one of the biggest considerations here is that these programs are extremely costly, and when you pay for them, it still doesn't move you any closer to a modern operating system. So you might want to think closely about making sure you invest those dollars in a place where you are going to get some benefit. So as previously mentioned, if you haven't already, now's the time to begin your Windows XP migrations. organizations should look at deploying Windows 7 if they want to get all the benefits out of it. We do advise customers to look at 7 and 8 side by side. Basically, it really depends on where you are from an infrastructure perspective and what your use case is, whether or not you have a touch environment use case or not. But both operating systems can cohabitate next to one another. So if you're looking at the new tablet slate devices, you should be looking into deploying Windows 8. Otherwise, probably stay on the Windows 7 platform. And you also want to at the same time, possibly looking at your applications and how you can modernize them to take advantage of some of the new capabilities in Windows 8. So when you look at a deployment project, when you decide to deploy a new Windows operating system, you need to do a significant amount of preparation. You need to look at all your applications and make sure they're identified, ready to go. We have some tools out there, which I think is the next slide, to help you with that. In parallel, you need to make sure your infrastructure is ready for the newer operating systems, depending on what facets of those operating systems you're going to implement. You want to check out that. You want to make sure your systems management tools have been upgraded to the required version to support the new OS. If you use System Center Configuration Manager, etc. Part of those infrastructure changes, for example, if you're implementing a Windows 7 technology called Direct Access for always connecting into your environment as a replacement to VPN, there are definitely infrastructure upgrades and enhancements you have to make on the back end as well. So when all that sort of is going on, you can also be looking to create a master image for your OS. And over the years, the process of doing that has matured. With the current recommendation is to completely automate that process with no user interaction. We can do in-place upgrades. We do them as demos for customers all the time, migrate the data, migrate the operating system, all automated on the device itself. So that's something to take into consideration as well. There's the image of putting on new as well as existing computers, so you need to make sure that both are well tested and preferably automated, and make sure that you have confidence that all the finer points around user settings and data, the applications, etc., are all there once the deployment completes. I think that's the last thing about this is it's important to note that none of this should be considered throwaway or one-time work. In fact, there's a lot of benefits to maintaining this. When we look at how we advise customers to deploy Windows 7, the tool set, the process, the approach was all the same in Windows 8. So if you developed it once, you can actually replicate it for newer operating systems. We're going to stay with that. That's been our direction in the past, and we're going to continue to go in that way. Jump to the next slide here. So a lot of tools that you can use for that deployment project. All of these mentioned here are offered by Microsoft as downloads. I guess the Windows Deployment Server isn't. It's part of the Windows Server operating system. So to get modern all the tools you use, please search for these in TechNet. They can be quickly downloaded and put into place. One helps with application compatibility, obviously. The other one is the entire deployment toolkit, which helps you build your image, insert applications into it, and make sure that you have a scripted set of pseudocode you can walk through that will do your deployments. And like I mentioned earlier, really briefly, Windows Accelerate is a program that Microsoft has to help accelerate deployments of either 7 or 8 from XP. And it's an internal program at Microsoft, so if you have a Microsoft account team, you can inquire to see if any of these benefits. We have a bucket of deployment money we use annually with our partners and our consulting services, and they can help you make use of that. Excuse me. So I believe this is probably the last slide for me on here, and I'd like to turn it back over to the great folks at PC Helps. I know that when my customers come to me with training or transition issues, I'm happy to make that first call to them, and also glad to have them as a go-to partner in this regard. So with that, I'm going to hang around for the question period, but other than that, I think I'll turn it right back over to Joe.
Thank you very much, Brett. Thank you both for bringing the information, and it's really indeed good news that with the compressed time frame to the end of life for XP in 2003, that there are tools that make it easier than previous migrations, and that those tools are going to be reusable. And we also thank you for your vote of confidence. I do want to then bring some bad news. Even though there are better tools now for making migrations, they're never easy. And just when it would be really, really nice to be able to say, okay, it's on everybody's desktop, we're done, let's go home, there are other things that can happen. And I think this picture kind of gives you an idea what some of them are. Because frequently business users, when faced with a new technology, don't always react the way we would like them to. And so what we're going to take a look at is why you might want to consider that in your migration plans and what can actually be done about it. And some of these will actually build on things that Brett pointed out. The one thing that can happen is after you've done a great job of delivering the thing, people look at it and they don't like it, and what do people remember? Well, everybody hated using it because it was new. They didn't know what to do. And so it can make it be a fearful thing. And the worst part is sometimes it's really somebody else's job to make that next step, but you're not sure how they're going to do it or if they're going to do it well. So what we're going to share is some things to expect that may help you either take that next step yourself or give some advice to the people who will be responsible for it so that what happens after it lands on a desktop won't reflect negatively on your migration. One of the keys to that is to realize that there are basically two kinds of things that affect the return on investment from a migration. There's one that affects it negatively. That's disruption. That's the pictures you see here with people saying, what am I supposed to do with this thing? The other, which is much harder to track but can be potentially much, much greater, is the hoped for increase in productivity with the business users that results in a much larger return on investment. We're going to take a look at both sides of that. And what's very natural is to take a look at a new operating system, a new version of Office, and assume that if it looks really, really, really different, it's going to be incredibly disruptive. But if it doesn't look very different, it's not going to give you a lot of productivity increase. As we go along, looking at Windows 7 and 8 and also the various versions of Office a little bit, you'll find that that's not entirely the case. Now, if any of you go back as far as I do and remember the transition from Windows 3.1.1 to Windows 95, you may recall it was quite disruptive for business users because the interface was entirely different. And it took them quite a while to get used to the technical advances and take advantage of them. And so the productivity didn't really increase that much. And what we were left remembering is just how big a change that was. Now, since then, until Windows 8, the changes to the interface have been much more incremental, and so there has been less disruption. But we're going to take a look at least one case where we may have missed an opportunity to actually increase return on investment, and that would be with Windows 7. Windows 7 does look a lot like Windows XP, but when you move to Windows 7, there are still some disruptive elements. This is because business users, unlike technicians, don't do much with Windows unless they have to. So it's quite entirely possible that many of your business users may not have changed a Windows setting for months, maybe even years. So they're going to have questions about those things that they don't do very often. Those questions tend to focus around personalizing the environment, things like how do I change my resolution so I can see it better, or how do I get the picture of my puppy that I love so much on my desktop, even though I'm now feeding that particular dog some food that's aimed specifically for older dogs, but they want that picture on there. And since it's been a long time since they did that, they need some help doing that. Also, they had arranged their tools in a way that they got used to, and everything was there, and they didn't have to do much rearranging. And they often have to replace those shortcuts and create that working environment. Those are almost unavoidable. But there is a way, starting with Windows 7, and we'll see that this also applies to Windows 8, that you can do a lot in a fairly short time to avoid those things being disruptive. And the key to that is understanding that Windows 7 is primarily a search and bookmark interface like the Internet. It is no longer primarily for the business user a navigation interface. Now, as technicians, you still need to learn how to navigate to everything. But for a typical business user, there's a single procedure that we're going to be able to teach people that will help them find what they need. Let's think about a couple common scenarios. I need to add a Bluetooth device. I need to add a printer. Now, the navigation instructions for those things are quite different and rather long. But if you notice in Windows 7, if you bring up the Start pop-up, whether you do it by hitting your Windows key or clicking on the little orb, the cursor's flashing in the search area of that. And if you teach people to go there and type a keyword just like they would do if they were searching the Internet, they type Bluetooth, it will find add a Bluetooth device for them. They type printer, it will find add a printer. They type resolution, it will find how to change the resolution on your screen for them. And so we have a single procedure to do pretty much everything that business users want to do that's very easy for them to learn because it actually uses a familiar approach because they all use the Internet. You have the back-end statistics to prove that. So that is a great way to, if you get people to understand that, it's a great way to not only keep them more productive, but also to cut down on your support need during that kind of a transition. It gets rid of a lot of the disruption. Now, on the other side, Windows 7 is actually, in terms of productivity, rather deceptive. It looks so much like XP that people think I should use it just like XP when I'm actually in the desktop. But there's some productivity gains that are available, especially for people, and I know there's one on the call because I'm him, who in XP always opened their apps in exactly the same order because the order they're on in that taskbar is important to me. It makes me work better if they're in the same order. Well, in 7, not only can you reorganize them just by clicking and dragging, but you can also pin them in particular spots, and that alone, if people come to understand that, will gain some productivity for them, and it'll be something that they like, especially your executive admins. You have a very high percentage of those that will love that feature, but they may not find it on their own. Additionally, the right-clicking gives you the jump list, which allows you to pin files and folders and things there. So it gives you another layer of quick organization. And again, that's a significant productivity boost, but people do not tend to find it on their own. You need to lead them to it. And so that it looks the same, they don't need anything, is not entirely true. Once we are in the desktop in Windows 8, it looks very similar, and everything we said about the Windows 7 desktop applies. But when you look at the main interface on Windows 8, you're going to say, wow, this thing's going to be completely disruptive. And if you have people who are used to XP or have been using 7 and haven't discovered that it's a search and bookmark interface, it indeed will be because it does look very different, although there are some analogies we can draw that will help people with that. But if they know that it's search and bookmark, while you go to the Windows Start screen, you don't see a blinking cursor in a search box. If you start to type on that screen, it immediately opens the search window and searches for apps, and then you can also switch it to settings or files or any other search app that you want very quickly. So the same approach. Instead of trying to teach people lots of different ways to navigate to all the different things they need to get to, you teach them this is like the Internet. Search for what you need, and then bookmark it if you think you're going to go back very often. And that's really what the Start screen in Windows 8 is about. It serves exactly the same functionality as the pop-up Start menu in Windows XP and Windows 7 did. You don't really want to, while you can get to everything from it, you don't want to put everything on it or it just becomes useless. It's a place for bookmarking the things you go to most often, just like you would bookmark frequent web pages in your browser. And it gives you lots of ability to organize things. But if you think of it as being the same function as the Start Pop-Up, okay, the Start Pop-Up is vertical, this is sideways. Other than that, they really serve a lot of the same functions. Now, the Windows 8 Start screen does give you things like live tiles, where you can see your new emails coming up inside the actual Mail app tile. You can see your next appointment coming up in the Calendar tile without having to open anything. The key to really getting people to use it effectively is for them to realize that this is indeed a search and bookmark interface, and that it works very much like the Start Pop-Up in Windows 7. Now, one of the things that I was most disappointed with in terms of some of the early press on Windows 8 is I was reading a fairly well-known industry publication, and they had a Windows expert saying that the only way to close an app in the modern app in Windows 8 was to go to Task Manager and end task. That didn't sound right to me, so I started looking for other ways and actually quickly found some. But what really shocked me is that somebody who knows enough about Windows to be asked to write an article about a new version didn't try Alt F4, which actually does close apps just like it has all the way back to every version of Windows I can remember. People see something new and they think they have to do everything in a new way. That is not the case. The shortcut keys still work. You can still do everything with a mouse. It's a little different because of the no compromise, so that you can have the same interface for touch and for keyboard and mouse. But you can do everything with keyboard and mouse. And I've been doing that for a while. And quite frankly, when I drop my little slate in its dock and have a keyboard and mouse, I will go the entire day and never use the touch screen. Because once you get used to it and you understand you're doing the same things, just perhaps in slightly different ways, but in many ways, the ways you did it before will still work, it really is a lot less different and disruptive than you might initially think. And of course, most of what your people will be doing is going to be the Microsoft Office suite and things that run in the desktop app. And as soon as you open the desktop app, it does look very much like Windows 7 and really works the same way, the same jump list, the same pinning, pretty much the same thing. So now what we'd also like to do is take a look at Office. And we're going to ask you to do one more poll, if you'd be so kind to give us some information, because it'll help us kind of target what we say in our time about this, as to whether you think you'll be going not changing versions of Office or going to 2007, 2010, or 2013, because logistically we've found that people tend to make Office migrations when they make Windows migrations, just because if you're going to set up a machine, you may as well set up both at the same time. And it certainly goes easier that way. I still see quite a few people responding, and 2010 has a pretty significant lead. We'll get you all the results in. Yeah, we're still getting some responses, so we'll leave it open for a little bit longer, and then we'll get you some results. We do appreciate you giving us this feedback. Okay, so it looks like we're mostly moving to 2010. Let me bring those results up so we can see them. And yeah, it looks like largely 2010. Some folks staying with what they're in. And actually it's a little more 2013 than I would have initially expected. But there are some real positives about 2013, especially if you're in a situation where you're going to be having anybody using touchscreen devices. 2013 is designed to be more touch-friendly, and that can make a really big difference. So let's take a look at interfaces. And again, it's the same thing. You can have disruption, and you can have productivity increases from Office interfaces. Now, the Office interfaces all continue to be primarily navigation interfaces. And what can happen in a big gap is if you're moving from 2003 to 2010, you're going to be moving from the menued interface to the fluent or ribbon interface. And when you do that, it can be really disruptive, but again, there's a way to help people understand it that will help them make that transition well and actually gain productivity rather than having quite so much disruption. The key there is to understand that that menu interface, while people are very comfortable and productive in it right now, that's largely because they've been using it so long they've gotten used to it and they just know where things are. And when they first ran into a particular interface, it didn't seem quite so useful to them. On the other hand, the Fluent or Ribbon interface, its productivity is based on discoverability. And it actually does, if you think about it the right way, make it much easier to find the tool you need, even if you didn't know that tool existed. That's largely in contrast to the menu interface, because the menu interface, while over time it grew some rather strange appendages from some funny places, as is prone to happen, but originally it was based on the idea of what kind of tool do I want. So as a business user, you first had to learn about software tools to be able to find the one you wanted. Business users don't like doing that. And that's why the Fluent interface doesn't ask people to do that. It's organized based on what the user wants to accomplish. Now, if you've worked with the folks as much as I have, you're aware they don't always know exactly what they want to do. But on the other hand, they certainly are more quick to figure that out than they are to go and study a bunch of tools as an intermediary step. And so the key question for them to learn to ask is, what do I want to do? If they use that question to approach the interface, we've seen people go from I've never seen this before to I can find things I want and even things I didn't know existed that I want very, very quickly. Again, the older interface, because of the different kinds of tools for different purposes, was different in every application. But if you look at the new interface, it is consistent across applications in that you take a consistent approach. You may want to do different things in the different applications, but it does allow you to find those things in a consistent, easy-to-use way of looking for them. So these are differences in the interface that if people understand the interface. They understand when they're looking at a search and bookmark interface, when they're looking at a navigation interface, and the real keys to navigating that interface can really do a lot to reduce disruption and also to increase productivity, and especially with the new Office interface, because there are great tools out there, and if you know what to look for, does a pretty good job of making people aware. So how do we make people aware of how to do these things? The keys are to provide tools, and there are a lot of them out there. We actually at PC Helps do not do a lot of producing of tools for people per se, reference tools, because if you search Microsoft's website, there are a lot of great ones out there. If you are moving from a menued interface 2003 to 2010, as it looks like a good number of you may be doing, then a tool you particularly want is the interactive guide. This is also available for 2003 to 2007. If you're going to 2013, the guide for 2010 will probably work. What that allows people to do is click through the old interface, and it shows them how to do it in the new interface. So it's an interactive tool that takes their existing knowledge they've built up over time and turns it into base knowledge in terms of how to do the very specific thing that they want to do right now. That tool, if you're doing an Office migration, is one you want to make sure you have. There are lots of other good ones out there. But the problem with most tools is getting people to actually use them. And that's where training can come in, because if they will actually come to training, it's more than anything else. If training gets them to understand where the tools are and a few other things, that will do a lot to help people move along. And so the training doesn't have to be, and in fact, it's probably impractical to let me show you everything you need to do in Windows 7 or Windows 8 or Office 2010. No way you're going to get people to take that kind of time. But if you do trainings based on understanding, it can be a lot quicker. So one thing we do tell people to avoid is you can see a lot of training out there where they had training in earlier versions and they copied and they pasted, and they then changed anything that was already in there that was changed by the new interface because it was called something different. That typically is a how to navigate, how to do it step-by-step kind of approach, and that takes too much time and gets too little results. You really need to focus on understanding rather than memorization. You need also to make sure that your logistics are realistic about end user availability, because these people will not give you an entire day in all likelihood. And the other thing is, and while it may not be training per se, but opportunities to experience it through things like device bars, loaner programs, etc., will do a lot, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Now, what about support? Whether we like to admit it or not, a lot of the support on these things comes by leaning over the cubicle wall and talking to the person in the next cubicle. The quality of that support is really hard to make sure happens in a good way. As a result, if you can identify those department gurus that people turn to, first of all, they make great people for pilot programs and giving you feedback, but getting them training really goes a long way to improving your peer support that's going to happen no matter what you do. Don't forget that your peer support for your key executives is their executive assistant. They do not call the help desk. They ask their executive assistant, who may give them the answer or may call the help desk on their behalf. So they're another key group. The other thing is providing in-house support. Again, you don't have time to train everybody in every little detail. And while technicians eventually need to learn all this, the first thing they need to learn is how to think about the application, because that will provide many, many more answers than they'll be able to provide by learning each thing as an individual piece. And also something that we at PC Helps do is provide help desk augmentation. Because when you do a lot of rollout and you have a lot of people calling at once, not only do you need somebody who can answer the questions, you need them to be available. And sometimes that's just not practical, and that's why there are help desk augmentation programs like ours available. Let's take a look at some of the challenges that we face. Right now, increasingly organizations are seeing multiple Office versions and OS versions across the enterprise. You may choose to go there if you have a mobile group for whom Windows 8 is really the right thing to do, but it doesn't make sense to do that for the rest of your people. Supporting devices, especially if you have a BYOD policy, more and more challenge, because yes, I'm working with Excel. No, you're not. You're working with something that works in your device. It's not really Excel. All this is changing. New models are coming out. We have multiple upgrades on various things at the same time. So the pace of change is really increasing the pressure on your support organization. And also, as the workforce becomes more mobile, they take their device with them, and so they're working in more places and at different times than they ever did, which increases the span of hours that you need to cover. With all that going on, you need to have a definite strategy for not only getting this migration done, but also for maintaining your sanity afterwards. And so the first thing is that you need, as IT, to keep in a strategic leadership role. And that includes making sure, even if it's not entirely your job, that the business users are able to actually use the product. And doing that effectively will actually increase your space in the business and your importance to the business. So you want to stay there. Key to that is making sure you understand the business user's needs. That's tough because you actually have to ask people, and very often they'll say, oh, we have everything we need, or we don't know what we need. But if you don't get that, it makes it much more difficult to actually have it work once you roll it out. You need to establish priority and align key resources. You don't necessarily have control of all the resources that need to be used to make this a completely end-to-end successful rollout. You may need to get the training department to do it. There may be other business unit people that need to be involved. So thinking through everything you need to do ahead of time and reaching out and you set the agenda for what they need to do goes a long ways towards getting a completely successful rollout. Communicate the initiative and make a splash. Put the candy dishes out where the people go. Send them emails, not just telling them it's happening, but when it happens, here are some of the great things you'll be able to do. Put device bars or demonstrations of the product where people go, the lunchroom, the big sales meeting, by the water cooler. Let people see it and see it in a positive light first. And that will go a long way towards getting people to cooperate with the things they need to cooperate with to make it work when it actually rolls out. That's part of developing a comprehensive end-to-end plan. Even if you're not the one that's going to execute some parts of it, you need to be a driving force in it and make sure that the plans are indeed in place. And budget for the big picture, especially if it involves other people's budgets. If you recognize what's going to go on, you talk to the training people and they've budgeted $5 for this, it's going to be a problem and it's going to reflect negatively on you, even though it wasn't your responsibility directly. So you need to take a big picture look at the budget from promotion, actual implementation, and actually getting people up to speed. So those are, and that, of course, no matter how good your plan is, things are going to change partway through. Sometimes people don't know right offhand exactly what they need or want, and they can't communicate it to you the first time you talk to them. So as you go through this, you do need to keep a feedback loop with the various stakeholders, and don't forget that the business users are a good part of that. Okay, that was a lot of stuff to cover, but we do want to make sure that we handle your questions. So Elaine, would you please open the phone lines for questions? And we'll actually begin a Q&A with any questions that have been chatted in.
Certainly, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, if you would like to register for a question, please press the 1 followed by the 4 on your telephone. You will hear a 3-tone prompt to acknowledge your request. If your question has been answered and you would like to withdraw your registration, please press the 1 followed by the 3. You may also use the chat feature located in the lower left corner of your screen. One moment, please, for the first phone question.
Okay, do we have any chat questions that we should tackle? We have some people watching those for us. Okay, one of the ones that came in, and Brett may want to speak to this somewhat, although I do have something I'd like to say, is do people really need things from the Windows Store?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Go ahead, Brett.
Yeah. So I guess at a basic level, you can work on a Windows 8 device or a Windows RT device without a store. However, if you want to add software to your device, or if you want to update software which is put on that device, you're going to need access to the store to do it. So I guess technically no, but sort of in that age of wanting to use new applications, the store is required for sort of the modern Windows Store applications.
Thanks, Brett. I do want to share an analogy that I've had people ask similar questions. Notice that Microsoft's not the only one with a store. Notice that the Windows Store is not the only Microsoft store. There's also an Office store, and there's also coming up a SharePoint store. And there's a reason as an IT professional you want stores, and it's security. Operating systems have traditionally been sort of like a house where they didn't put any locks on the outside doors and secured it by locking everything valuable that was inside the house. Well, that's never going to be all that secure, and it eventually becomes pretty inconvenient. The key thing about a curated store that you as an IT person will come to appreciate over time, from my point of view, is they're putting locks on those outside doors. Not only do they lock the door, but they now do a background check before they let anybody in. So over time, it's going to be more secure as it goes in that way. And not only that, but they'll be able to unlock or take the locks off a lot of the things inside, which will make for a convenient and more trouble-free experience, because security won't get in the way as much, even though it's better. So yes, you do not have to use the store at this point, but if my understanding of why they're doing the curated stores is correct, stores are something I would expect to see more of in the future, just for security purposes, if nothing else. Elaine, do we have any live questions yet, or should I give another chat question?
There are currently no phone questions at the moment, sir. However, ladies and gentlemen, if you do need to register for a question, please press the 1 followed by the 4 on your telephone keypad. One moment, please.
Okay, another chat question came in. Do you have any data that suggests a price point, replace disk space, insufficient free disk space, add memory, etc., at which you should replace the PC versus upgrade the OS? It's going to be more Brett than me, I think.
Yeah, I mean, my perspective there is, most companies have a natural hardware refresh. There's nothing standard, though. I have companies that go on 3-year refresh and go on 6, 8-year refresh. I think probably the advice I give customers there is, 1, model your use cases. So you might have anywhere between, let's say, 3 to 8 different use cases, typically at my customers that, I have a salesman use case, I have an office worker, I have a remote worker, I have an executive. Those are my use cases. Look at what operating system you're going to run on that. Does 7 make sense? Does 8 make sense? The hardware footprint is roughly the same. You have to look and see how much data needs to be stored on that device to make sure that you cover off on your disk storage. You have to look and see what applications am I running for that use case. Do I have enough horsepower, meaning processor and memory, above and beyond what's minimum for an operating system? And then you would sort of model them accordingly. That would be, I don't believe we have a one-size-fits-all for that answer. That would sort of be my approach with that one.
Thanks, Brett. Elaine, if there are any come in, please just let me know. But we do have a backlog of chat questions here, so I'll just keep running with them unless you let me know there's somebody who wants to do a audio question. Next on the chat is a question, with data following a device in the cloud, how can IT protect data that should only be backed up to corporate clouds such as SkyDrive Pro as opposed to just SkyDrive for personal use?
Okay. So yeah, we probably didn't do the best of jobs in terms of naming those products. SkyDrive Pro was an extension of growth out of SharePoint services, and it is for enterprises internally, where SkyDrive is a free service which is in that same space for customers as where the other things like Dropbox, iCloud, and there's something from Google Drive, I guess. We offer a lot of advantages over those products in terms of storage and functionality. The biggest one being that SkyDrive works on all kinds of devices. You can have an app for iOS, you can have a Windows phone, you can have an Android, you can have a PC, etc. iCloud, you need an iDevice for to access. So when you look at how do you manage where those things go to? So one of the things that, Joe, you brought up in the call about Office 2013, if you haven't, as a personal user, gone out to the Office 2013 trial and done the install, I'd highly encourage you to do it. Because when you do that, it installs the applications in a application virtualization state. So in other words, it doesn't matter what version of Office you have on there now. You can go install the ReadyClick Office 2013 trial, and it will install those applications side by side, and there won't be any application conflicts. That's a great way to try out the product. The install time is also streamed down, so it is probably going to be about, I'm going to say 10 or 20% of the normal install time that you would see for Office. It's really something to see. When you use products like Office 2013, they default in their save to SkyDrive Pro, not SkyDrive. And in fact, there's actually a group policy object setting that allows you to disable SkyDrive itself as a means to save within Office 2013. So if you want to force your users that the default is to SkyDrive Pro in your Office applications, you can do that. There's still a bit of play that users could get creative with. So for example, on Windows 8, you can install the SkyDrive app, and you could just go move your entire My Documents folder to SkyDrive, without sort of any regulation at all. I know some customers block those services at the firewall. That's one approach to it. We really don't have a fail-safe way of ensuring that one document goes to one storage place and one goes to the other. Even internally here at Microsoft, if I were to take the presentation that I showed to a customer yesterday and put it on my SkyDrive account, that would be grounds for dismissal. I have to say my business content in SkyDrive Pro, and it's largely up to me. It's largely up through policy. You can do some things, like I said, with group policy object and configuring around the firewall, but that's really the limitation you have in terms of how those, how you can divert data to the right place.
All right, thanks, Brett. What I like best about your answer is it confirmed that I'm not the only one who found the similarity of names a little confusing at times. So,
yeah. One thing we take.
Okay, we do have one more question. What do you recommend for situations where an application vendor requires an XP system? In other words, the application is not qualified for Windows 7.
Right. Well, first thing I do is I go to the Application Compatibility Toolkit, which, looking at the list of things here, you would have to go search on that sure, Mark. On TechNet, there's a lot of community knowledge that's kept in there about applications, and maybe the vendor is telling you that, but there may be ways of shimming the application to make the application think it's still running on XP. If your vendor is drawing a hard line in the sand on that, it might be a good time to start rationalizing vendors as well to get somebody who's going to come into the modern age, because I don't see the date of support changing. It's going to be out there, and this person is developing applications to a very limited market if they're targeting XP. So that would be my direction. If it's something where you still can't get the application to work after looking at the Application Compatibility Toolkit, I would engage Microsoft, either through your account team or through Premier Support, if you have that through your company, to let them know that you have this situation, and perhaps they can bring in a support engineer to help remedy the situation. That's how I would approach that.
Thanks a lot, Brett. Thanks for joining us today and bringing all that very helpful information. We also want to thank all those who joined us today as participants. We're coming up on the end of our time, so we don't want to go on any further. But we do realize that you might have additional questions, so we have some contact information up there. As always, we are here to help you be successful. We are here to help your business users be more productive, to show that return on that technology investment and help move your business forward. So it's been our pleasure to share with you today. We hope that you found it helpful, and will feel free to contact us with any follow-up questions. But at this time, we will be ending our webcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, that does conclude the conference call for today. We thank you for your participation and ask that you please disconnect your line.